They say that sometimes the most innocent hobbies can reveal the darkest secrets, but I never expected that my wife's sudden passion for photography would lead me to discover not just her affair, but a systematic deception that had been going on for years, ultimately driving me to orchestrate a revenge so comprehensive that it exposed her lies and destroyed the false life she had built around her betrayal. My name is Maxwell, and this is the story of how my wife's photography hobby became the tool that revealed her infidelity and led me to expose her deception in the most devastating way possible. My wife Rebecca and I had been married for 9 years when she developed what seemed like a genuine interest in photography. Rebecca had always been creative and artistic, but she had never shown particular interest in photography until she suddenly announced that she wanted to take a photography class at the local community college and invest in professional camera equipment. Initially, I was supportive of Rebecca's new hobby and impressed by her enthusiasm for learning a new skill. She seemed genuinely excited about photography and would spend hours researching different cameras, lenses, and techniques online. She talked about wanting to develop her artistic eye and potentially even starting a small photography business in the future. Rebecca enrolled in a weekend photography class and purchased an expensive camera and lens set that cost several $1,000s. She explained that she wanted to invest in quality equipment that would allow her to take professional-level photographs and really develop her skills as a photographer. The photography class met every Saturday morning for 3 hours, and Rebecca was always eager to attend. She would leave early in the morning with her camera equipment and would often stay after class to practice with other students or to explore different locations around the city for photo opportunities. Rebecca also began to spend significant amounts of time during the week working on her photography, claiming that she was practicing techniques she had learned in class or editing photos on her computer. She would often work late into the evening, and she seemed completely absorbed in her new hobby. Most importantly, Rebecca's photography seemed to be bringing her joy and giving her a sense of creative fulfillment that she had been missing. She would talk enthusiastically about the techniques she was learning and the photographs she was taking, and she seemed proud of the progress she was making as a photographer. However, as months passed, I began to notice some inconsistencies in Rebecca's photography activities that seemed unusual and concerning. Despite her claims about spending hours taking photographs and practicing her techniques, she rarely showed me any of the photos she was supposedly taking, and when I asked to see her work, she would become evasive and suggest that she wasn't ready to share her photos yet. Rebecca also began to be secretive about her photography equipment and her computer files in ways that seemed unnecessary. She would become defensive when I showed interest in her camera or asked about the photos she was working on, and she would quickly close her laptop when I entered the room while she was supposedly editing photos. When I suggested that we could go on photography outings together or that I could help her with her equipment, Rebecca would insist that she preferred to work alone and that she needed to focus on developing her own artistic vision without outside influence. These behaviors seemed inconsistent with the collaborative approach that had characterized our marriage, and I began to feel that Rebecca was hiding something important from me about her photography activities or the people she was meeting through her class. Most concerning of all, Rebecca's photography activities seemed to require an unusual amount of time and secrecy. She would claim to be going on photography expeditions that lasted entire days, and she would often be unreachable by phone during these times, claiming that she was in areas with poor cell service or that she was too focused on her photography to answer calls. I decided to investigate Rebecca's photography activities more closely to understand what she was actually doing during the time she claimed to be pursuing her hobby. What I discovered was shocking and revealed the extent of Rebecca's deception about her activities and her relationships. Rebecca had not been taking photography classes or pursuing photography as a hobby at all. Instead, she had been using photography as an elaborate cover story for a long-term affair with a man she had met through an online dating platform. The photography class, the expensive equipment, and the weekend outings were all fabrications designed to give her regular opportunities to meet with her affair partner without arousing my suspicion. The man Rebecca was having an affair with was someone she had connected with several months before she had announced her interest in photography. They had been meeting regularly for romantic and sexual encounters, and Rebecca had been using her supposed photography activities as cover for these meetings. Most shocking of all, Rebecca had been systematically lying about virtually every aspect of her photography hobby. The community college class she claimed to be attending did not exist, The photography equipment she had purchased was being used primarily to document her affair rather than to pursue artistic photography, and the time she claimed to be spending on photography practice was actually being spent with her affair partner. Rebecca had also been using her photography cover story to justify significant financial expenditures related to her affair. The expensive camera equipment she had purchased was real, but it was being used to take intimate photographs with her affair partner rather than for artistic purposes. She had also been using photography as an excuse to spend money on hotels, restaurants, and travel related to her affair. The photography expeditions that Rebecca claimed to be taking were actually romantic getaways with her affair partner. They had been traveling to different cities and locations for weekend trips, and Rebecca had been using photography as an excuse to be away from home for extended periods without arousing my suspicion. I realized that Rebecca's deception went far beyond a simple affair. She had created an elaborate fictional hobby to cover her infidelity, and she had been systematically lying to me about her activities, her interests, and her financial expenditures for months. The person I thought I knew as my wife had been living a completely double life. The most painful aspect of this discovery was understanding that Rebecca had been planning and executing her deception with sophisticated attention to detail. She had researched photography enough to speak convincingly about techniques and equipment. She had created believable stories about classes and assignments, and she had been maintaining her cover story consistently over many months. I decided that Rebecca needed to face serious consequences for her systematic deception, and that the truth about her affair needed to be exposed in a way that would hold her accountable for the damage she had caused to our marriage. I wanted to document her lies and ensure that she could not continue to deceive me or other people about her behavior. The plan I developed was designed to gather evidence of Rebecca's affair and her deceptive use of photography as a cover story, and to expose her behavior to the people who needed to understand the truth about what she had been doing. I wanted to use her own photography equipment and activities as tools to document her deception and reveal the reality of her affair. The first phase of my plan involved using Rebecca's own photography equipment to document her affair and gather evidence of her deceptive behavior. I installed tracking software on her camera and computer that would allow me to monitor her actual photography activities and to see the photos she was really taking. This investigation revealed the full scope of Rebecca's deception and the extent to which she had been using photography as cover for her affair. The photos on her camera were not artistic landscapes or portraits, but intimate images of her with her affair partner in hotel rooms, restaurants, and romantic locations. The metadata from these photos showed that they had been taken during the times when Rebecca claimed to be attending photography classes or practicing her techniques. I also discovered that Rebecca had been using her photography equipment to document her affair in ways that were both intimate and incriminating. She had been taking photos and videos of her romantic encounters, and she had been sharing these images with her affair partner as part of their relationship. The second phase of my plan involved tracking Rebecca's actual activities during the times when she claimed to be pursuing photography. I hired a private investigator to follow Rebecca during her supposed photography outings and to document what she was actually doing during these times. The private investigator's findings confirmed that Rebecca's photography activities were entirely fabricated. During the times when she claimed to be attending classes or taking photographs, she was actually meeting with her affair partner at hotels, restaurants, and other romantic locations. The investigator was able to document their meetings with photographs and video evidence that clearly showed the romantic and sexual nature of their relationship. The investigator also discovered that Rebecca and her affair partner had been taking multiple weekend trips together, traveling to different cities and staying in expensive hotels while Rebecca claimed to be on photography expeditions. The evidence showed that Rebecca had been using our joint credit cards to pay for these romantic getaways while lying to me about their purpose. The third phase of my plan involved gathering evidence of Rebecca's financial deception related to her fake photography hobby. I analyzed our credit card statements and bank records to document how much money Rebecca had been spending on her affair, while claiming that the expenses were related to photography equipment and activities. The financial evidence was staggering. Rebecca had spent thousands of dollars on hotels, restaurants, travel, and gifts related to her affair, all while claiming that these expenses were necessary for her photography hobby. She had been systematically stealing from our joint accounts to fund her betrayal, adding financial fraud to her emotional infidelity. I also discovered that Rebecca had been lying about the cost and purpose of her photography equipment. While she had indeed purchased expensive camera gear, she had inflated the costs and had been using the equipment primarily to document her affair rather than to pursue artistic photography. The fourth phase of my plan involved confronting Rebecca with comprehensive evidence of her deception and giving her an opportunity to acknowledge the truth about her affair and her lies about photography. I wanted to present her with undeniable proof of her behavior before exposing her deception to other people. The confrontation with Rebecca happened on a Sunday evening in March, exactly 10 months after she had first announced her interest in photography. I had prepared a comprehensive presentation of all the evidence I had gathered, including the intimate photos from her camera, the private investigator's documentation of her meetings with her affair partner, and the financial records showing how she had been funding her affair. Instead of the quiet evening she expected, I presented Rebecca with her own camera containing the intimate photos she had taken with her affair partner, along with detailed documentation of her fake photography classes, her romantic getaways, and her systematic financial deception. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. I had her own photographs showing her affair, witness testimony from the private investigator, and financial records proving that she had been stealing from our joint accounts to fund her betrayal. Rebecca's reaction was initially one of shock and panic as she realized that her elaborate deception had been discovered and documented in detail. She tried to deny the evidence at first, claiming that the photos had been taken out of context and that I had misunderstood her photography activities. But the evidence was too comprehensive and specific for her denials to be credible. I had documentation showing not just her affair, but also her systematic lies about photography classes, equipment purchases, and weekend expeditions. The metadata from her own photos proved that she had been lying about her activities for months. When Rebecca realized that denial wasn't working, she changed tactics and tried to justify her affair by claiming that our marriage had been lacking in romance and excitement. She suggested that her affair had been a response to problems in our relationship and that her lies about photography had been necessary to protect my feelings. But I was not interested in Rebecca's attempts to rationalize her systematic deception and infidelity. She had created an elaborate fictional hobby to cover her affair, and she had been stealing from our joint accounts to fund her betrayal. She needed to face the full consequences of her choices. That evening, I also revealed that I planned to expose her deception to our mutual friends, her family members, and potentially her employer if her affair had involved any professional misconduct. I told her that I would be ending our marriage and that I would be taking steps to protect myself from any further financial deception. Rebecca was devastated to learn that her affair and her lies would be exposed and that she would lose the false identity she had been using to cover her betrayal. She begged me to handle the matter privately and suggested that she could end her affair and be honest about her activities if I agreed not to expose her deception. But I had already made the decision that Rebecca's systematic deception was too extensive for private resolution and that other people needed to understand the truth about her manipulative behavior. Her lies had been too fundamental and damaging for me to consider any alternative to complete exposure. The fifth phase of my plan involved exposing Rebecca's deception to our mutual friends, her family members, and our broader social circle. I organized a presentation where I shared the evidence I had gathered, including Rebecca's own photographs documenting her affair and proof of her systematic lies about her photography hobby. The presentation was attended by many of the people Rebecca had been deceiving, including friends who had been supportive of her photography interests and family members who had been proud of her artistic pursuits. I shared the intimate photos Rebecca had taken with her affair partner, documentation of her fake photography classes, and evidence of her financial deception. The reaction from our friends and family was one of shock and betrayal as they realized how completely they had been deceived about Rebecca's activities and interests. People who had believed her stories about photography classes and artistic development felt manipulated and angry to learn that they had been supporting a lie. The exposure of Rebecca's lies also revealed that she had been deceiving other people in our community about her activities and interests, and that our marriage had not been the only relationship affected by her systematic dishonesty. Most importantly, the exposure of Rebecca's behavior completely destroyed her credibility and reputation in our social circle. People who had previously respected her as a creative and artistic person now saw her as a manipulative deceiver who could not be trusted. The sixth phase of my plan involved ensuring that Rebecca faced legal and financial consequences for her deception and theft. I consulted with lawyers about protecting my assets and ensuring that Rebecca's affair and financial fraud would be documented for divorce proceedings. The legal proceedings were straightforward once Rebecca's deception was exposed, as it became clear that she had been systematically stealing from our joint accounts and lying about her activities throughout our marriage. The evidence I had gathered provided clear documentation of her fraudulent behavior. I also worked with financial advisors to understand the full scope of the damage Rebecca's deception had caused to our joint finances and to develop strategies for recovering the money she had stolen to fund her affair. The aftermath of Rebecca's exposure was swift and comprehensive. Her reputation in our community was completely destroyed, and she found herself ostracized by people who had once considered her a close friend and trusted family member. Rebecca's affair partner also faced consequences when his own wife learned about the relationship through the evidence I had shared. His marriage ended immediately, and his reputation in his professional and social circles was severely damaged. Most importantly, Rebecca's elaborate deception had ultimately achieved the opposite of what she had intended. Instead of allowing her to maintain her affair while preserving her marriage and social standing, her lies had ultimately cost her everything that should have mattered to her. The divorce proceedings were decisive and favorable to me, as the evidence of Rebecca's affair and financial fraud ensured that I received a fair settlement and that she was held accountable for the damage she had caused. The experience taught me valuable lessons about the importance of investigating suspicious behavior and being skeptical of sudden changes in interests or activities that seem designed to create opportunities for deception. Looking back on this experience, I am proud of the way I handled the discovery of Rebecca's deception. I could have confronted her immediately when I first became suspicious, but instead I took the time to gather comprehensive evidence that exposed the full scope of her lies and manipulation. The marriage that I had thought was built on love and shared interests had actually been built on systematic deception and elaborate lies. But the process of exposing Rebecca's affair had also revealed my own strength and resilience, and it had prepared me to build future relationships based on honesty and genuine connection. Rebecca's affair and photography deception had been interconnected crimes against our marriage and against the principle of honest relationships. She had been willing to create an elaborate fictional hobby and maintain sophisticated lies for months to cover her infidelity and financial theft. The revenge I orchestrated against Rebecca was comprehensive and devastating, but it was also necessary to protect my interests and to expose the truth about her manipulative behavior. She had chosen to build her deception on lies and theft, and she had to face the full consequences of her choices. The photography equipment that had enabled Rebecca's deception had also provided the evidence needed to expose her affair. The irony was not lost on me that the very camera she had used to document her betrayal had ultimately become the tool that revealed her lies and destroyed her false life. In the end, Rebecca's elaborate deception had achieved the opposite of what she had intended. Instead of allowing her to maintain her affair while preserving her marriage, her lies had ultimately cost her our relationship and had exposed her true character to everyone who knew her. The most important outcome of this entire experience was that I was able to reclaim my life from Rebecca's web of lies and deception. I was no longer living with someone who had fabricated an entire hobby to cover her infidelity, and I was free to build future relationships based on honesty and genuine shared interests.